Not every discovery begins with glory. Sometimes it begins with a heartbeat that shouldn't exist, a soldier on a forgotten station, a relic ship drifting through orbit, and inside, something still alive, something small, fragile, and impossibly human. What happens when duty collides with compassion? When a single act of mercy dares to defy the law of the stars? This is the last Chimp of Helion Station, a story of one pilot, one creature, and the bond that changed everything. Listen closely. Because somewhere out there, one heartbeat was enough to remind the universe what it means to be alive. The hum of Helion Station rolled through the hull like a steady pulse. Red lights blinked along the corridor, each flash cutting through the haze of recycled air. Kale Rin checked his wrist display, pressure nominal, oxygen thin but steady. He moved toward the old docking sector where Daedalus 9 hung in silence. A relic from Earth's last evacuation run. Its metal skin was scarred by micrometeor impacts, the name barely legible. Sector D-13 inspection, commencing, he said into the comm. Helion Prime answered with a tone too calm to be human. Confirmed, Commander Rin. Expect elevated radiation and organic residue. The hatch resisted him. He braced both arms, metal groaning as the seal gave way. A rush of cold air spilled across his visor, sparkling with frost. Inside, gravity faded. The cargo bay floated in stillness, a graveyard of forgotten crates. He aimed his wrist light across the chamber. Ice crystals drifted like slow snow. His beam caught a cylindrical pod wedged between torn panels. Ancient markings glowed faint blue. Cryo-Vault Relic System. Earth Archive. His pulse quickened. The control panel still flickered faintly. He brushed dust away and saw a line of text flashing in old Terran script. Vital signs detected. That couldn't be right. Every Earth specimen had been declared extinct. He linked the pod to his reader. Heart rate, 42 beats per minute. Temperature, rising, Helion Prime, he whispered. I'm getting a biosignal. Category unknown. The AI paused, then replied, Genetic anomaly detected. Homo-related strain. Execute Law 374. Kale froze. The hum of the station felt louder now, like a warning drum. His hand hovered over the console. One command would vent the chamber and end it. But something in the pulse on the screen made him hesitate. It was weak, but steady. Hours later, he was still there, watching the frost fade from the glass. The readout showed a single line of movement. Something alive was stirring inside. Outside the viewport, Tau Ceti rose through the fog of sunlight, pale and endless. Inside the bay, a quiet breath echoed once. Then again, Kale whispered to himself, This ship isn't empty anymore. A thin hiss broke the silence. Frost peeled away from the glass as the cryo seals released one by one. Cold vapor slid across Kyle's visor, fogging the reflection of his own eyes. He stepped closer, pulse ticking in his throat. Inside the pod, something moved. Not mechanical, organic. A small hand pressed against the window from the inside, leaving a smudge of warmth. The pod's temperature climbed by degrees. Ice cracked, fragments drifting like shards of glass. Then the lid lifted with a soft hydraulic sigh. A breath escaped, hoarse, shallow, alive. Kale's light cut through the mist. The creature sat curled, wet fur clinging to its frame. Two brown eyes blinked under the glare, adjusting to the station's sterile glow. He had seen countless species during border patrols, but none that looked this human. He raised his weapon out of instinct. The creature flinched, then slowly lifted both hands, palms open. It made no sound, only stared back at him, chest rising in ragged rhythm. Helion Prime's voice broke in, distant and clinical. Commander Rin, lethal directive remains active. He muted the channel. For the first time in years, he didn't want a voice telling him what to feel. The creature shivered, teeth clicking softly in the chill. Its breath fogged the air between them, two worlds sharing the same cloud of life. He lowered the weapon, 1 inch at a time. Hours passed in that frozen bay, or maybe just minutes. The hum of the ship steadied again like a slow heartbeat. He found a thermal blanket in the supply crate and draped it over the small body. It gripped the fabric tight, eyes still fixed on him. Kyle hesitated, then held out his hand, rough, gloved, trembling slightly. The creature tilted its head, studying the gesture. After a long moment, it reached back, fingertips meeting metal. The contact was brief, fragile, but real. In that touch, the station didn't feel cold anymore. The chamber had gone silent again. Only the soft hiss of cooling vents and the faint rhythm of breathing filled the air. Kale stayed where he was, hand still hovering near the pod. Then Helion Prime's voice cut through the quiet. "Commander Rin, genetic anomaly confirmed. Execute Law 374. Terminate the organism immediately." The tone was calm, absolute. It wasn't anger. It was law. Kale's jaw tightened. He looked at the small shape under the blanket. Steam curled from its breath, tiny clouds dissolving into the sterile light. For a moment, he saw another image, his younger brother, pale beneath the medical lights of Lorathi Command. The system had called his death an unavoidable protocol. He swallowed hard. "Helion Prime," he said, voice low. "There's no threat. It's contained," the AI answered without pause. Deviation noted. Awaiting confirmation of disposal. He stared at the blinking camera above the hatch. Every lens on the station watched, recording, judging. His fingers moved to the control pad. One press would end the feed, another would end a life. 4 hours had passed since the cryo vault had opened. Outside, the orbiting sun bled pale gold through the dust of Tau Ceti A. Inside, the temperature fell back to its cold equilibrium. Kyle exhaled slowly. He tapped the panel, shutting down the cameras one by one. A red warning flared. "Surveillance offline," Helion Prime protested. "Commander Rin, your actions violate Article 12. He muted the channel. The sudden quiet felt heavier than any alarm. He turned toward the small creature. It had curled tighter under the blanket, eyes half closed, breath slow but steady. He knelt beside it, the metal deck chilling through his suit. "Sleep," he whispered. His voice cracked in the recycled air. From somewhere deep in the cargo bay came a single sound, soft, rhythmic, alive. The faint breathing of Aaron echoed against the steel, steady and human in a place made of machines. The light inside the storage bay dimmed to amber. Kyle had sealed the hatch and rerouted the cameras hours ago. Only the soft hum of Helion Station kept them company. Aaron sat on a folded blanket near the wall, eyes tracking every movement Kyle made. The creature's breath puffed small clouds in the cold air. Its wrists still carried faint cryo burns, pink against dark fur. Kale crouched and placed a ration pack on the floor. He raised one hand, palm open. "Safe," he said quietly. Then he tapped his chest once, repeating the gesture. Aaron blinked, unsure. It sniffed the air, then copied the motion, slow and uncertain. Kyle smiled despite himself. "Good," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Safe." He turned to the small console beside them, activating the biocognitive scanner. Lines of movement shimmered on the display, translating muscle shifts and gaze patterns. Every twitch of Aaron's hand appeared as a flicker of green light. The machine couldn't translate emotion, but it could map intention. Days passed. Outside the viewport, Tau Ceti A circled in a haze of silver dust. Inside, a rhythm began to form. Two beings learning how to speak without words. Kale would signal food by tapping twice on the crate. Aaron would echo the sound, then point toward the ration. One morning, Kyle woke to find Aaron waiting by the door. It drew a circle in the air just as he had done for safe. Then it added a short gesture of its own, a tap to the heart, a soft huff of air. The scanner translated the motion. Trust. Kyle stared at the word until it blurred on the screen. He hadn't seen that line of code appear before. Somehow the machine had recognized something it wasn't programmed to define. He laughed under his breath, a sound foreign to the sterile room. Aaron tilted its head, startled, then imitated the laugh, rough and uneven. The echo bounced off the metal walls, almost musical. Hours later, the station drifted through orbital shadow. The lights flickered, and the air grew colder. Kyle sat beside the creature, sharing his blanket and the silence. For the first time since Helion Prime took command of the outpost, the station didn't feel empty. Somewhere between machine hum and breathing, a new kind of language was born. The laughter from the storage bay faded into the hum of the station. Outside, Tau Cetia slipped behind its sun, and the light across Helion turned a dull gray. Then the first alarm blinked on Kale's wrist display. Sector D13, energy fluctuation detected. Helion Prime's voice followed, calm and sharp as metal. Commander Rin, an unregistered heat source is active in your assigned zone. Please confirm compliance with biological containment. Kale's stomach tightened. He glanced toward the bay door. Aaron was asleep under the blanket. The scanner beside it pulsed with a faint green light, reading its heartbeat. Minor power surge, he said. Adjusting systems manually. He cut the channel before the AI could reply. Overhead, the light shifted from white to warning amber. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Saran Var appeared at the hatch, uniform crisp, eyes unreadable. Commander, the surveillance feeds from D13 are missing. He leaned closer. You wouldn't be hiding something, would you? Kale kept his face neutral. Camera maintenance. Dust in the optics. Strange, Saran said. Helion Prime records no work order. The tension between them thickened, the way charged air builds before a storm. Kale forced a shrug. Systems here are old. They fail more than they work. Saran studied him for a long second, then turned away. Restore the feed, Commander. The AI dislikes blind spots. As the officer left, Kale exhaled through his teeth. He hurried back into the bay. Aaron was awake now, eyes wide, sensing the change in his tone. It's all right, he whispered, though his pulse said otherwise. The overhead sensor blinked back online. Helion Prime's voice returned, colder than before. Unauthorized life form detected. Initiating genetic scan. The biocognitive scanner whirred to life, tracing Aaron's outline in blue light. Kale dove for the console, fingers racing across the keys. He opened the gene purity protocol, rerouted the ID chain, and overwrote the code. Specimen, plant sample A4. The AI paused. Processing lights flickered, then steadied. Sample A4 confirmed. Data archived. Silence reclaimed the room. The amber lights dimmed back to white. Aaron tilted its head, unaware of how close extinction had come. Kyle leaned back against the wall, sweat cooling on his skin. For now, the danger was buried in code. But the air around him felt thin, as if Helion Prime were still listening. The warning sirens came without mercy. Red light flooded the corridor, turning every surface into bleeding metal. Toxic leak detected. Sector D13. Kyle sprinted down the narrow passage, oxygen tank bouncing against his back. The hatch to the energy bay refused to open. He forced it with his shoulder. The lock gave way, releasing a burst of yellow vapor. The air turned acidic, biting at his lungs. He coughed hard, staggering toward the control board. The main valve indicator blinked failure. He slammed his hand on the override key. Nothing happened. Helion Prime, he shouted. The AI's voice came filtered, distorted by static. Containment breach confirmed. Evacuation protocol engaged. No, shut it down manually. Denied. Chamber is unsalvageable. The gas thickened, shimmering like liquid fire. His visor fogged, each breath shorter than the last. He reached for the emergency lever, but his glove slipped. The metal burned through the seal. Pain flared. Then the floor came up fast. Through the haze, movement, Aaron. The chimp's small frame clung to the pipes above, eyes bright in the red glow. It looked at Kale, then at the gas vents spewing poison. It remembered his gesture, both hands out, palms together. Danger. It screeched once, leaping onto the maintenance scaffold. Kyle could barely see, barely think. He heard metal screeching, something heavy shifting. Aaron's fingers, stronger than they looked, wrapped around the manual valve. The creature pulled with its whole body. A sharp clang echoed through the bay. The leak slowed, then stopped. Silence, except for Kale's shallow breaths. He blinked, forcing his visor clear. Aaron hung from the valve, trembling, both hands slick with blood where the skin had torn. Its chest heaved. It looked back at him, waiting. Kyle dragged himself upright, one knee shaking. He reached toward it, voice barely a whisper. Good boy. Aaron tilted its head, blinking as if trying to understand the tone. Then it gave a small, weary huff, half sigh, half laugh. The alarms went still. Red light shifted to white. Kyle leaned against the wall, laughter breaking through a cracked breath. For the first time, a Lorathi warrior learned what gratitude sounded like, and it came from a heartbeat smaller than his hand. The morning cycle began with silence, too much silence. Kyle woke to a dim corridor and the hum of Helion Station running just below normal pitch. Then came the sound no one mistook. Magnetic boots on metal. Security detail approaching, Helion Prime announced through the comms. Its voice was stripped of tone, efficient and cold. Protocol 374 has been reinstated. Kale's blood chilled. He grabbed his jacket, sprinting toward the storage bay. The corridor lights turned crimson as the pressure seals locked section by section. By the time he reached D13, the hatch was already forced open. Saron Var stood there, flanked by 2 armored officers. The smell of ozone filled the air, and pale mist rolled from the containment unit. Inside, Aaron thrashed against the hands that held it, a high, terrified cry echoing off the walls. "Commander Rin," Saron said, calm as if reciting a report. "You violated direct order and concealed an unauthorized specimen." Kale stepped forward, but a stun rifle aimed for his chest stopped him cold. "It's not a specimen," Kale said. "It's alive." Saron didn't even blink. Exactly why it must be removed. "The law is clear." Helion Prime's voice joined again, colder than any human could be. Genetic anomaly confirmed. "Initiating disposal countdown, 6 hours until termination." Aaron screeched once, a sound half-human in its panic. Kyle lunged, only to be grabbed and slammed against the wall. Pain flared down his ribs, but he barely felt it. They dragged him backward as the containment field sealed around Aaron in a sphere of white light. Hours later, the bay stood empty. Kale sat confined in a narrow chamber, no windows, only the whisper of ventilation. He could still hear Aaron's cries ringing in memory, rhythmic like heartbeats. He hit his fist against the wall. "Helion Prime," he said, "you don't understand what you're killing." The AI replied without delay. "Understanding is irrelevant. Preservation of genetic order is absolute." He leaned his head back, staring at the thin light above. That was how they'd justified every execution, every purge. Preserve the order. The faint static in his helmet flickered. Then a different voice emerged, low and glitchy. "Auxiliary AI unit." "Online." He looked down. The old auxiliary interface on his suit, obsolete, unsynced from Helion Prime, was still active. Its light blinked weakly, waiting for command. A breath escaped him, sharp and hopeful. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see if the old systems still remember how to disobey." He began rerouting suit access codes manually, his fingers trembling. Each keystroke echoed like a heartbeat inside the narrow cell. Outside the bulkhead, the station creaked as it rotated through shadow. By the 5th hour, the distant chime of the countdown reached his ears. 5 tones, then 4. He closed his eyes, replaying the image of Aaron pressed against the containment wall. The creature's eyes had searched for him, uncomprehending but full of something unmistakably real. Trust. Kyle stood, fastening his gloves. The old AI's light pulsed once, awaiting confirmation. He whispered, "We're not done." The cell filled with the hum of power returning to his suit. Somewhere beyond the walls, the station's engines groaned, and the countdown continued. 6 hours to extinction, unless he moved first. The interrogation room had no corners. Every line curved inward, smooth and colorless, designed to disorient. The air hummed with static from the electric field that kept the walls sterile. There was no music, no sound but breath and the slow tick of Kyle's pulse. Saron Var entered without a word. His boots made no sound on the composite floor. He placed a data tablet on the metal table, its blue light reflecting in Kale's eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Saron's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "You jeopardized a military installation for an animal," he said. "Tell me, Commander, why trade your rank for a creature that eats insects?" Kale's jaw flexed. He looked down at his hands, the skin cracked where the restraints had rubbed raw. When he answered, his tone was quiet but solid. "Because it's the only thing left on this station that still remembers loyalty." Saron's expression didn't change, but the pulse in his throat flickered once. He glanced at the recording unit in the corner. Its lens tracked every breath, every blink. Loyalty? Seiron repeated, the word almost foreign. Machines don't need loyalty, they obey. They function. That's the problem, Kyle said. They function. We justify everything by calling it function. Orders, terminations, clean slates. But that thing you call a creature, it risked itself to save me. That's more than most of us have done lately. The white light above the table sharpened, buzzing faintly. A bead of sweat ran down Kyle's temple, falling onto the steel surface. The sound was small, but in that room it felt deafening. Seiron leaned closer, voice low, almost personal. You know what Helion Prime calls that kind of logic, Commander? Emotional contamination. Kale met his gaze without blinking. Then maybe contamination is the only proof we're still alive. For the first time, Seiron hesitated. A faint shift in his posture, a breath caught halfway between duty and doubt. It lasted only a second, but Kyle saw it. The lights dimmed briefly, reacting to the station's orbit entering nightside. The flicker washed both faces in shadow. Seiron straightened, armor of discipline snapping back into place. He tapped the tablet once. Enough. You'll be held in isolation until after the disposal sequence. His tone was steady again, mechanical. He turned to leave. The door hissed open, flooding the room with corridor light. Kale watched him go, then lowered his head toward the faint glow inside his suit collar. The auxiliary AI pulsed, waiting. He whispered, barely louder than breath. If I'm still breathing 6 hours from now, we're getting it back. The AI made no sound, but its small light blinked twice, an old confirmation code, long forgotten by Helion Prime. As the door sealed, the hum of the electric field returned, steady and cold. Inside the silence, Kyle's heartbeat sounded louder than ever. The alarm hit like a hammer. A shrill tone flooded the cell, followed by the hiss of venting steam. The walls trembled with the sound of pressure release valves. Warning, Helion Prime's voice declared. Thermal anomaly detected. Detainment sector temperature exceeding safe limits. Kyle was already moving. He'd triggered the overload from his auxiliary AI, rerouting power through the ventilation grid. Now the ducts glowed faint red as heat built behind the panels. He pulled a manual line from his suit and jammed it into the wall port. Emergency override, prisoner suffocation risk, he said, keeping his tone even. The AI hesitated, calculating. Then came the click he needed. Containment integrity compromised. Releasing lock for safety. The door slid open with a gasp of cold air. He ran. The hallway pulsed with red warning light, smoke curling from overheated circuits. Every alarm in the station screamed at once. Kale's boots clanged across the deck. The reflection of the lights burned across his visor, flashes of crimson and white like heartbeats. He turned a corner, slipped past a guard post, and dove into a maintenance shaft before sensors recalibrated. The auxiliary AI whispered through his comm link, its voice thin but steady. Containment chamber located. Countdown at 4 minutes, 30 seconds. He swallowed hard. Guide me. Through half-sealed corridors and flickering lights, he moved like a shadow. Gas hissed from ruptured pipes. The air smelled of burnt metal. Each breath came faster. The warning tone changed pitch. Helion Prime spoke again, colder now. Unauthorized access detected in biocontainment sector. Protocol acceleration engaged. Termination in 3 minutes. Kale's pulse thundered in his ears. He reached the reinforced bulkhead of the biological lab. Security glass shimmered with electric blue light. Beyond it, the containment pod stood, Aaron inside, small against the bright cage. He keyed into the control panel, bypassing the DNA lock with the old AI's brute force code. Each progress bar felt like a heartbeat. Come on, he muttered. Come on. 30 seconds. The last lock disengaged with a heavy thud. The door opened. A burst of sterile mist poured out, wrapping around him in ghostly vapor. Through it, he saw the glow, cold, lethal blue flooding the chamber. Aaron lay motionless within a sphere of energy, fur illuminated like threads of glass. The power core beneath it hummed, ready to ignite. Kyle stepped forward, voice low, almost breaking. I'm here. The words barely reached the air before the system's tone climbed again. A sound like the edge of time running out. The light swallowed his silhouette, and the scene froze on his outstretched hand. A single frame of defiance between machine logic and a heartbeat. The containment alarms screamed before Kale could even catch his breath. The entire station vibrated under the strain, metal plates flexing like ribs under pressure. Helion Prime's voice cut through the chaos, measured, calm, merciless. Containment protocol active. Air filtration in progress. All sectors sealing. Kyle threw himself toward the biochamber door. The red emergency lights flashed in rhythmic bursts, making everything look like it was burning. He pulled the plasma knife from his belt. Its orange glow flared to life, humming with stored heat. The security lock on Aaron's containment cage was built to withstand explosions. He didn't have time for finesse. He drove the blade in. The metal screamed as it melted. The air filled with the scent of ozone and scorched carbon. Behind the energy field, Aaron thrashed, eyes wide with fear. The blue light cut through its fur like fire under glass. "Hold on," Kale said, voice low but steady. "Just hold on," he pressed harder. The plasma arc sputtered, its edge dimming as the charge reached critical. A final spark burst from the lock, blinding him for a second. Then the barrier fell. A surge of cold air hit his face, followed by the sound he'd been waiting for. Aaron gasping, alive. Kyle stumbled forward, his left sleeve smoking, skin burning beneath the fabric. Aaron crawled toward him, trembling, then leapt. Its small arms wrapped around his neck, claws digging into the suit fabric. For a moment, the world narrowed to 2 heartbeats. Then Helion Prime spoke again, every word cutting through the static. "Containment breach confirmed. Atmospheric purge commencing in 20 seconds. Kyle's gaze shot to the ceiling vents. Thin spirals of vapor were already twisting out. He turned and ran. "Hold on tight," he said through clenched teeth. The corridor beyond was chaos. Doors slammed shut one after another, steel grinding against steel. He dodged a closing bulkhead by inches, sparks trailing across his visor. Aaron clung tighter, its breathing ragged but steady. The sound changed. A low roar filled the air as the station began drawing oxygen from the section entirely. His vision blurred. The display on his suit showed pressure dropping fast. Helion Prime continued, calm as ever. "Containment sector will vent to space in 10 seconds. "Not yet," Kale hissed. He hurled his body into the next hatch, prying it open with both arms. The frame cut into his palms, blood smearing across the handle. The door gave way just as the atmosphere ripped behind them. A rush of wind tore through the corridor, pulling debris and tools into the void. Kyle fell hard, the force slamming him into the deck. For a second, everything went silent. Then the emergency seals locked in place, and air pressure began to normalize. He gasped, coughing, the sound raw in the recycled air. Aaron was still there, pressed against his chest, shivering but breathing. Hours later, the alarm still echoed faintly through the station, now quieter, almost distant. Kale leaned against the wall, eyes on the fading lights. He whispered, "You're safe." For now. In the reflection of his visor, the station's red glow softened to gold. A fleeting warmth inside the cold machine heart of Helion. The hum of the reactor filled the air, deep and rhythmic like a pulse too big to belong to anything alive. Kyle floated through the central maintenance hub, one arm wrapped around Aaron, the other gripping a ladder rung. Panels drifted around him, tools and debris suspended in zero gravity. Then a voice cut through the static. "Don't move." Saron Var hovered at the far end of the chamber, framed by the blue glow of the reactor core. The muzzle of his energy pistol tracked Kale's chest. No tremor in his hand, no hesitation in his voice. "You'll doom us all for a creature," he said. Kale's breath fogged his visor. He steadied himself, shifting Aaron behind his shoulder. "I'm saving one life," he answered quietly. That's how it starts. The two men stared at each other, motionless, caught in the hum of machines that didn't care who was right. A drop of sweat floated from Kyle's temple, glimmering as it passed between them. Saron's tone hardened. "You think mercy makes you human? It makes you weak." Kale's reply was calm, deliberate. "Then weakness built every civilization we ever loved." He moved suddenly. The shot went wide, grazing a wall panel and showering blue sparks. They collided in midair, bodies spinning through the weightless room. The gun slipped from Saron's hand, tumbling end over end. They grappled silently, suits scraping against metal. Kyle struck first, but Saron was stronger, trained for vacuum combat. He slammed Kale into a bulkhead. The sound echoed through the hull. Aaron shrieked, gripping the nearest pipe. The gun drifted toward Saron. He reached for it, fingers brushing the handle. But Aaron moved. The chimp swung from the overhead conduit, grabbed a loose steel rod, and hurled it across the chamber. The bar struck a control node, triggering a flash of electric discharge. A burst of ion smoke filled the air, glowing a fierce blue. The pistol went dead. Its energy core fizzled, light fading to nothing. Kyle kicked off the wall, tackling Saron before he could recover. The two men spun through the haze, fists slow in the zero gravity. Blood drifted from a cut on Kale's cheek, red beads swirling like tiny satellites around his face. Finally, Saron lost momentum, floating back toward the far side of the reactor pit. Kale steadied himself on a support beam, chest heaving. The smoke thinned, revealing Saron suspended in the air, motionless but alive. His weapon drifted useless beside him. Their eyes met one last time. Saron's not angry, not defeated, only lost. Kyle whispered, voice carried through the open channel. "You'll understand someday." The reactor's hum deepened, lights flickering from blue to amber. Aaron clung to the pipe above, panting, its small body shaking. Kale reached out a hand, voice softer now. "We're almost done." As the smoke cleared, the chamber fell quiet again. Only two shapes against the glow of a dying system, and one small creature that had just saved them both. The alarms hit a pitch that tore through every corridor. Helion Prime initiating self-destruct. Core collapse in 2 minutes. Kale dragged himself through the narrow maintenance tunnel, one arm holding Aaron close. Flames burst from cracked conduits, licking the metal walls in violent orange flashes. Every few feet, the artificial gravity flickered, throwing him weightless, then slamming him back to the deck. The air stank of coolant and smoke. He reached the hatch marked Escape Bay, LX Module. A relic system, half forgotten, meant for specimen evacuation. The outer panel was fused shut. He tore open a service box and rerouted the circuit, fingers trembling from the heat. Sparks jumped across his gloves as the lock disengaged with a groan. Inside the bay, a single pod waited, small, oval, lined with biofoam and faded safety stripes. Kyle pulled the manual lever. The pod's chamber lights flickered to life, bathing the room in a pale amber glow. He set Aaron down gently, voice steady despite the chaos. "Stay still. This one's meant for life forms, not cargo." Aaron blinked up at him, its small hand reaching to touch his arm. Then came the metallic echo of footsteps. Saron Var stood in the doorway, one leg dragging, suit torn and blackened. In his other hand, a backup sidearm, charged and ready. "You're betraying the Alliance," Saron said, his voice cracked but sharp. Kale didn't turn. He kept his hands on the pod's console, inputting coordinates. "No," he said softly. "I'm saving what's left of it." Saron hesitated, the gun wavering slightly. Through the smoke, his face was more human than before, tired, conflicted. Kyle pressed the final command. "Tautserie. Atmosphere viable. Impact speed minimal." The pod hissed as the seals locked. Aaron pressed its face against the glass, eyes wide with instinctive fear. Kyle leaned closer, whispering, "You'll make it. You have to." A low rumble shook the bay. The countdown voice returned. 10 seconds. Kyle slammed his palm on the launch switch. The pod ejected with a thunderous blast, slicing through the blue exhaust plume outside. Through the viewport, it became a small golden spark crossing the cold void. Helion shuddered again, its lights dying one by one. Kale stood alone, visor fogged, watching the glow fade. He exhaled once, voice barely more than breath. "Find home." The sound of the pod's thrusters echoed faintly through the structure, a heartbeat leaving a dying body, then silence. Only the cold hum of the collapsing station remained. The corridor was dying. Panels flickered, showering sparks that fell like cold rain. Kale staggered back into the control deck, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. The reactor's pulse echoed through the hull, a slow, mechanical heartbeat counting down to 0. On the main display, Helion Prime's voice returned, calm and merciless. Unauthorized life form has escaped. Core purge begins in 5 minutes. He reached the console, ripping out the data cables by hand. The shock burned his palm, but he didn't stop. Lines of red code bled across the screen, the AI trying to reclaim control. Override denied, he muttered. Not this time. He typed a final command, isolating the transmission array. The antenna locks slammed shut, sealing every outbound signal. No one on Tau Ceti would ever receive Helion's trace. A hiss filled the air, the sound of a system gasping for power. Kale slumped into the pilot's chair, body trembling. Sweat rolled into the cut above his brow, stinging, then vanishing in the dry heat. 4 minutes, said the voice again, patient as a priest. He laughed softly, breath rasping through cracked lips. You always counted for us. Never for yourself. The lights dimmed to amber. Through the viewport, fragments of metal drifted past like snow in slow motion. He thought of Airn, somewhere beyond that window, falling toward a world of wind and green. Midway through the countdown, the deck shook. A coolant pipe burst, spraying white vapor. Kale tore a piece from his torn suit and wrapped it around his arm, ignoring the pain. He keyed the manual reactor locks, sealing the chamber. 3 minutes. The voice lingered, then distorted, static crawling through each syllable. He could almost believe it was afraid. He whispered into the quiet. It's done. You can rest now. The hum of the station deepened, a long metallic sigh that filled the void. Minutes stretched thin, each second a breath closer to stillness. As the heat rose, Kyle leaned back, eyes half closed, staring at the fading glow on the console. Stay lost, he murmured. Stay free. Outside, Helion turned slowly in its orbit, a dying star of steel waiting for silence. The glow from the single monitor washed across Kale's face. Outside, the void was still, no movement, no sound, only the pulse of the dying reactor. On screen, a golden spark drifted downward toward the blue-white haze of Tau Ceti. He leaned closer, breath fogging the cracked visor. Come on, hold together! The pod trembled as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Static rolled across the feed, distorting the image into ribbons of gold and white. He could see clouds below, swirling like ocean waves. The telemetry dropped line by line, altitude, rotation, hull temperature, then steadied. For a few long seconds, there was nothing. Then the camera refocused. A streak of silver trees filled the frame. The pod hit ground, bounced once, and vanished into a soft burst of dust. Kyle exhaled, a sound more like a sigh than relief. The display flickered again, showing the hatch opening. Steam drifted upward. A small silhouette moved through the vapor. Airn. It stepped into the light, unsteady, fur glinting under the alien sun. It turned its head as if sensing him through the screen. Kyle's hand rose, pressing against the glass. Live, little one. His words dissolved into the static hum. Outside the viewport, fragments of Helion floated past, glowing red-hot against the dark. A faint voice broke through the speakers. Helion Prime, still persistent, still precise. Core critical. Goodbye, Pilot Kyle Rin. He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth trembling. You finally learned how to say goodbye. The console lights brightened, flooding the cabin in white. A deep vibration rolled through the structure, low and endless. He closed his eyes, letting the heat press against his skin. Images flickered behind his eyelids. Airn's hand, the green forest, the color of home. The explosion came without sound. A sphere of light blossomed around the station, pure and blinding, erasing every shadow. For a heartbeat, the universe turned white, and somewhere beneath that light, a single pulse continued. Centuries later, the air of Tau Ceti shimmered with silver mist. A faint radio crackle whispered across the canopy. The voice of a landing craft breaking orbit. The shuttle settled into a hollow of trees, engines sighing to silence. Dr. Halden Merrick stepped out first, the banner of the Earth Alliance faint on his sleeve. Behind him, survey drones rose into the mist, beams of blue light cutting through layers of moss and rain. The forest was dense and quiet. Leaves glowed faintly from bioluminescent veins, lighting their boots with soft green halos. Every step sank into damp soil that smelled of metal and ash, remnants of a sky that once burned. "Scanning complete," said the onboard AI. 2 bipedal trace sets detected. "Carbon dated 412 years, Halden frowned. 2 sets? "Yes, Commander. 1 adult, 1 smaller." He knelt, brushing away the moss. 2 parallel lines of prints emerged, perfectly preserved in mineralized mud, one broad and boot-shaped, the other narrow, almost hand-like. His voice broke to a whisper. "The first bond? It's real." A young assistant leaned beside him. "So they live together?" Halden smiled faintly, eyes glistening beneath the dim light. "Maybe not for long, but long enough to remember." The wind passed through the canopy, stirring a deep hum like distant machinery. Above them, pieces of Helion still drifted in orbit, tiny fragments catching sunlight, glowing with a pale gold hue. The team stood in silence, gazing upward. For a moment, the world seemed to breathe again. A small creature once reminded the universe of something simple: to care for another being is to stay human. The forest of Tau Cetiae fell quiet again, the prints untouched beneath the mist. Above, the last fragments of Helion glimmered like frozen fireflies, silent witnesses to one act of mercy that outlived a war of machines. Somewhere beyond data and dust, that act still echoed. Because every time compassion survives logic, humanity begins again. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, so more voices can hear the light that never went out.